Hey folks, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio, where all of our shows are on the Beatles, the group years, the solo years, anything we feel like covering here on the channel. Every now and then I like to do what I call the ultimate Beatles trivia show. And we've done 6 of them so far. We have 3 contestants on the show, and we're going to introduce to you the 3 contestants in just a moment. But whoever who has won in the previous show has to come back, or we do whatever we can to beg that person to come back to the show. And there are no prizes as of yet in this program, but we're just here to have some fun. And we test your knowledge, our contestants' knowledge, and you folks who are watching, you can test yourselves, which is all part of the fun. Your knowledge of Beatles history and music. And so why don't I introduce to you our 3 contestants. First of all, our reigning king. From the last 2 shows, he is part of the 2-man lineup of Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, along with Tom Hunyadi. And he also has his own podcast show, which is called The Other Leg. Welcome back, Andy Nicholes.
Hi, Ken. Thanks for that great introduction. And hello, Susan. Hello, John. And thanks for having me back on and coordinating this next installment of trivia. And I'm going to be, the competition's fierce. So...
Well, you've amazed us so far with how well you've been doing. So let's see if you can keep the streak going.
Let's see. But thanks for having me back, and good to be here.
Okay. Susan Ryan is with us. If you are a frequent guest of the Fest for Beatle fans, she is a fixture over there. You see her on many of the panel discussions. Not only that, but she's now kind of in charge of scheduling all the panels as well. And she's also an author. As I hold up this book right here, The Beatles' Fab Four Cities. This book came out fairly recently, and she worked on this book with Richard Porter, who's best known for his tours of London, Beatle tours of London, and David Bedford, who you all should know for the many Beatle books he's put out, Liddy Pool and Fab 104. And it's all about all the important locations and venues in Beatle history in these 4 cities. Liverpool, Hamburg, London, and New York. You'll never guess by Susan's accent which city she covers in the book. But welcome, Susan, to Ken Michaels Radio.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me. No, nobody will ever guess where I'm from, because the minute I open my mouth, it's obvious. I'm very glad to be here. Nervous about the trivia because I know stuff, but I forget things when I'm under pressure. So, but I'm willing to give it a shot, and okay. Very glad to be here. And thank you for the nice, kind words about my book.
Okay. Well, I like to remind everybody, you could be the smartest person when it comes to Beatle knowledge, but when you're on a timer and you've got to come up with questions quickly, that's a whole other world sometimes. There are a lot of people who can figure out every answer if they're given a few minutes to do it. But when you got to come up with answers quickly, that's a ball game altogether. So don't worry about it. We're all here for the fun of it. John Montagna is back. He has been a guest on this channel. He's been on my other 2 podcast shows, Things We Said Today and Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles videocast. He plays the bass. He was in the Alan Parsons Project for, was it 7 years? I always ask
7
you,
years.
I never remember.
7 years.
7 years.
I'll answer the question as many times as you answer.
Okay. And also, you've seen him at the Fest for Beatle fans because he holds bass clinics there. He did one several years ago where he played what Paul played on the Abbey Road album very well. And he explained, how creative Paul was as a bass player during the Beatle years. And he's going to be doing more of that, I'm sure, at fests in the future. He also has been part of the house band for the Happy Together tours in the past. And a concert that you have heard me rave about on this channel, which is the Concert for Bangladesh Revisited. It's an annual thing that happens on Long Island where these musicians called Wondrous Stories, a great band from Long Island, they put on this show where they do every single song from the Concert for Bangladesh, except the long Ravi Shankar piece.
I was going to ask about that.
Indian pieces like they did the Inner Light a few years ago, and Within You, Without You. And in addition to that, they not only do that concert, but they do other Beatle music and George Harrison music. I've seen John there a few times. He performed someplace else, did a great version of it from Cloud 9 a few years ago. So if you ever do get a chance to see that show, and like I said, it happens every year, I tell you folks about it before it happens. Make sure you go and see that show, and hopefully John will be a part of the band that time out. But John, welcome.
Thank you
Enough of
very
my
much.
yakking.
No, that is your job though, isn't it?
I
Just
guess so.
to yak. No, I'm really looking forward to this. I make no assumptions, presumptions about my Beatles knowledge. I'm usually pretty sharp. I'm usually pretty deep. I am known for being able to sort of pivot any topic of conversation to the Beatles somehow. And people will come to me and say, "Hey, John, how come?" They'll ask me a Beatles question, and I'll start in with the rabbinical. Well, before we discuss this, we have to talk about da 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 da,
Uh-huh.
and then you see their eyes glaze over with that "Why did I ask him this?" look. So I make no assumptions about the ability to actually get my rear end kicked in this thing, but it's going to be fun either way. So I
Okay.
appreciate you asking, and I'm looking forward to it.
We won't have too much time to go in different directions here on the show. We'll kind of stick to the questions and the games. And just so that you guys know how this works, altogether in true Beatles tradition, there are nine questions or Beatle games to play here. The first three are worth 1 point each. The next three are worth 2 points each. The seventh one is worth 3 points. The eighth is worth 4 points. And the last one is worth 5 points. You cannot lose points in this show. This is not like Jeopardy, except in one particular instance. And this is where it's a little complicated. When you get to the seventh trivia question or game, if you get that correct, you win 3 points. But you also have the option, if you want to, of automatically being the first person to answer the eighth question or game. But you have to pick from 3 different games. And if you get it wrong, you lose 4 points. And you also give your opponents there the chance to gain 4 points. And sometimes what you decide to do after you get the seventh question can be all the difference in the world as to whether or not you win. Okay? That's the only time when things are just a little bit complicated here in the rules of the show. Also, if there's any question or game that requires more than one answer, as you give it, I'm not going to tell you whether you're correct or not. I'm only going to tell you if you're correct after you've given all the answers. All right? And since this is, as you're about to discover, a low-tech show, we don't have buzzers here or anything. What I have to ask you to do is just say your name right after I ask the question or present the game to you. Whoever who says it first gets to answer it first. But there are times when you say your names at the same time, and it's tough for me to figure out who said it first. So when that happens, I ask you to write down the answer. And that way, all the contestants, or if there's 2 of them, have the chance to win those points. Okay, I figured that's the only fair way to handle this until we become much more techie. I know Andy's going to help me out with coming up with this laser program that he has for this show. That should be coming soon. He promised me this. So until that happens, we have to work this way. And so I think that covers everything. All right, I'll be keeping score, so be nice to me. This is very easy math. So we're going to start with the first question, which happens to be the game, the Beatle one-liner. So that's when I recite a line from a Beatles song or a solo Beatles song, and all you have to do is name it. So when you're ready, after I've finished, just say your name. Okay, first one gets to answer it. Or like I said, if more than one of you say it at the same time, you'll write it down. All right, for 1 point, what Beatles song or solo Beatles song contains these lyrics? And if your heart's strong, hold on, I won't delay.
And
John, wait.
Okay, John, you were fast there. Okay.
Also, the name of a hit maker from the 80s, known for Missing You.
Only with an E at the end.
John Waite. Yes, exactly.
All right. So John has 1 point. Now, also for 1 point, I'm going to give you two titles of songs that made the A side of a single, Beatles or solo. You got to tell me what the B sides were. Okay. The first one, She Loves You.
John, I'll get you.
Wait, no.
Oh, do we have to do both of them? I'm sorry.
Got to wait till I'm done.
Tell who the new guy is. I'm sorry.
Should I do that over?
Yes.
Already gave an answer. Okay.
How about I just forfeit on this one in a very low tech way?
Okay. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's two answers?
It's two answers.
There's two
Yeah,
answers.
so, okay,
Say both.
right.
Actually, well, you gave an answer. I didn't tell you whether you're correct or not. So the first one is She Loves You. Second one is Spies Like Us.
Ooch.
Andy,
Okay.
it's I'll Get You and My Carnival.
Right. My Carnival. So Andy gets 1 point. And for you, Andy, It's a Lovely Day. That's in My Carnival.
That's right.
So the third question, this is a trivia question, is also worth 1 point. Who played the lead guitar part on George Harrison's I'd Have You Anytime?
Well, if the answer is wrong, we don't lose a point, right?
You don't, no.
Okay. Andy, Eric Clapton.
That's right. Okay. I thought that was a simple one. But you know what? Growing up as a kid, listening to All Things Must Pass, I used to always think that was George. And later on, you discover that is Eric Clapton there on the lead guitar part. Okay, so the next three are worth 2 points apiece. And our fourth trivia question or game is a Beatle game, which is called The Note They Never Wrote. This is a fun one because you have to name this song, which is not a Beatles song or a solo Beatles song, but there's a reference to the Beatles in the song's lyrics. Okay? What 1970 hit, a #3 song in America on the Billboard singles charts, had this reference to the Beatles in the song's lyrics? Unemployment rising fast, the Beatles' new record's a gas.
Ooh.
You can
Say
hear
the
it.
lyric again.
Unemployment rising fast, the Beatles' new record's a gas.
John, Temptations, Bold Confusion.
Excellent, John.
Ooh.
That's great.
Good one.
Classic tune from the Temptations, Ball of Confusion. And the band played on. Got to sing that real low, though. Such a great song there. All right. Again, for 2 points. Here's a trivia question. On the Beatles Anthology Volume 3 is an instrumental that George Martin composed called A Beginning, which originally was going to lead into another song on the White Album. What song was that?
John, Don't Pass Me By.
That's right. Okay. John, you're on a roll here. Okay.
I always told my parents this information would be good for something.
Only for this show. That's where.
This is it.
And you still don't win anything here.
It
Right.
is good for something if you can remember it.
This is true.
Yeah.
But that was a nice little extra thing to throw into the Beatles Anthology Volume 3.
Yeah.
Well, it was supposed to be now and then.
I know that.
Right.
Were there
Has
any?
anyone actually edited that onto Don't Pass Me By to see like what it sounds like as a,
I did. I didn't edit it, but I played the two of them back to back.
does it work?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it naturally flows, but
Right.
we'll see.
Okay.
All right. So now we're up to number 6 here. Another game. This is called All Together Now. Oh, you'll love this one. What you're going to have to do is I'm going to read to you the titles of 4 songs that were all in the top 10 in America the same week that were not Beatles or solo Beatles. And you've got to put your mind in a time warp and try and remember what Beatles song or solo Beatles song was in the top 10 the same week as these 4 songs. Okay?
Okay.
Please, Mr. Please, Olivia Newton-John. Jive Talking, the Bee Gees. The Hustle, Van McCoy. Swearing to God, Frankie Valli.
Andy,
Susan.
listen to what the band said. Wings.
Both you and Susan both raise your hands at the same time.
I
Made
don't
it
think it's right.
difficult.
I don't think I'm right. So
Did you have an answer?
I did, but it's not right.
Okay, well, Andy is right, so we'll give it to him then.
Yeah, it's not
Okay.
right.
How did you
I knew
figure that out, Andy?
As soon as Andy said it, I knew I wasn't right because I knew Andy was.
So as soon as I heard Jive Talking, my mind
Yeah.
went to 75.
Okay. Very
And
good.
I should have known that too, because that summer was the important summer with the Beatles in my life. There you go. So,
Mm.
but I
Really?
completely
I was only just
pressure
ruling out
stinks
anything by
because you get
John.
like nervous.
Well, that week happened to be the week ending July 19th, 1975. So Please, Mr. Please from Olivia was number 5. Jive Talking was number 9. The Hustle was number 2. Swearing to God from Frankie Valli was number 7. And Listen to What the Man Said was number 1 that week. Okay.
Wow.
So our score right now is John has 5, Andy right behind him with 4, and Susan hasn't scored yet.
I fully expected this.
Doesn't matter. We love you just the same.
Well, thank
That's
you.
right.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Trivia
So-
under pressure.
Yeah, if we're sitting and having a glass of wine for 2 hours, we could talk our heads off, right, Susan?
And come up with all the answers too.
Right.
Exactly.
Susan's about to leave for England, by the way, so she's got a lot on her mind. So
Okay.
just trying to give you an excuse here, Susan.
Thank you. I appreciate it. They give me the out. You know, it's good.
All right. So number 7 here is a trivia question. And like I said, if you get this right, you then will have the option, if you want to, of choosing for yourself between 3 games for the 8th question or game and being the first person to answer it. But you can also lose points by doing that. So that's why the 7th game or question is very important. In 1989, Ringo Starr did his very first tour with an all-star band. Besides himself, he had 2 other drummers that performed on that tour. Name both of them.
John, Zach Starkey, and Jim Keltner. No,
no.
no.
Okay, don't say anything.
No, you
Don't
only
say
get one chance to do it.
That's one chance. That's it.
How much time do we have?
A few seconds here.
Andy,
Okay,
Jim Keltner, and Levon Helm.
you got it. All right, Zach Starkey was in the second band, John.
No,
Ooh,
Good.
that
You're off there.
I
that's
saw
when
both
I
of
saw
those
him. So
tours
I would have had
also.
your answer, John. It's okay.
Zach Starkey?
I saw
Yeah.
both of them. I saw both
That's the
of
first
those
time I
tours.
saw him was that second go round. So yeah.
Can't
Yeah.
believe it. Ah,
I've been fortunate to see every tour. Never miss it. And I usually get to go to 2 shows or more. That's how much I love it. So, but that first tour, oh my God.
that was like the
Pack
yeah,
the stage or what?
yeah, that was quite the lineup.
All right. Andy, so you now can choose between 3 games, or you could be treated like everybody else, all equally. The 3 games, you got a pair of true and false statements. You have to get both of them correct. There's a game called Do the Math. And then there's a game called Two of Us. So you can pick one of the 3. And if you do, you will automatically be able to answer it first. But if you get it wrong, you'd lose 4 points. Or you can just opt out of it and be treated like anybody else and go for the 8th game or question.
What's the point count right now?
You have 7,
You
John
really
has
need to know?
5, and Susan's waiting to score.
So if I get it wrong, I lose 4 points. Oof, that's very tempting.
If you
But
get
if
it
I,
right, think about this. If you get it right, you'd have 11 points. And that means that even if John got the last one correct for 5 points,
yeah.
he'd still lose.
And I have no chance at all. So there you go.
Susan, what is it 1 question for true false or 2 questions?
And you have to get both of them correct.
Let's listen. Let's do true double Jeopardy style. Let's do it. Let's do true or false. Let's go all in there, Ken.
Okay. Remember, by the way, that when he answers this, I'm not going to tell him with each answer whether he's correct or not. So if he's wrong, that gives both of you the chance.
If I don't answer, do I lose points?
What do you mean?
No, right? Yeah, if I don't answer.
If all you have to do is say true or false for each of the two, and you have
Okay.
correct with both.
All right. Well, I gotta go.
Okay. All right, first one, true or false? All 3 volumes of the Beatles anthology hit #1 on the Billboard album charts in America. Is that true or false? Don't give the answer yet.
Yep.
The second one, Paul McCartney's debut album, McCartney, was the first solo album to make the top 10 on the Billboard album charts in America. First solo album. Is that true or false? So now you can answer both of them.
So question number 1 was, did the anthologies all go to #1?
All 3 of them.
That statement is false.
You're saying that they didn't.
Correct.
Okay. And what is your answer for the second one?
And that was that
First McCartney album, McCartney was the first solo album to make the top 10 on the Billboard album charts in America of the solo Beatles.
the solo Beatles. All right, give me a minute here. That statement is true.
Okay. So based on your 2 answers, you're wrong. So
Okay.
Okay,
I saw John raise his hand first, actually.
we're supposed to raise our hands or
Supposed
say
to
our
actually
names,
say
right?
your name, but
So,
I tell
didn't
you
raise my
what,
hand.
like I said at the beginning of the show, you did raise your hand, right?
I did.
You
yeah,
did.
and
I
you
think
did
so.
before.
Okay.
I didn't raise it to I wasn't going to answer either one. I was
Okay.
I was pondering because
Okay.
it would have been a complete roll of the dice for me on both of those.
Okay. Got to watch the way your hands are moving.
I can't deny my
Susan.
heritage.
Well, all right. So the first one, did all 3 anthologies get to #1?
Yes, on the
Is
Billboard album charts.
on Billboard album charts is
You have-
true, and the one about McCartney is false.
You're right.
Oh, I had it
Thank you.
reversed.
So all 3 anthologies made it to #1, but the McCartney album was the first solo album to hit #1, but Live Peace in Toronto was released before that, and that went top 10.
Ah, Live Peace in Toronto. Aha, did not think about that one.
Okay. So Susan is in the game. Look at this.
At least I didn't completely shame myself.
Andy has 7, John has 5, Susan has 4. If you're the only one that gets the last question here. Oh wait, we still have the eighth game or trivia question. All right. Anything could happen. It's anyone's game here. All right. This is a trivia question. This is worth 4 points. What song was performed and released by the Beatles as part of their BBC recordings that was also later produced by Paul McCartney for an album by Mary Hopkin?
Oh, I got it, Susan.
All right,
The
Susan.
honeymoon song. The honeymoon song.
Good.
Oh, very good, Susan.
Okay. So you now have 8 points.
She truly is the dark horse, folks.
Yes, he is. Okay.
An away game.
Now we have our last trivia question. And for this, you're all going to have to write this down.
Okay.
Get ready. Some of you are going to say this is way too easy. Some of you know this like the alphabet, but you may not have this all memorized. Okay. Name all 5 songs the Beatles performed in their debut on the Ed Sullivan Show on February 9th, 1964. All 5 songs. Give you about, I don't know, 30 seconds for this. Got to name all 5.
Mm-hmm.
Don't mix up the 3 different Ed Sullivan shows.
No.
No, yeah, we're talking about the first one, right?
Yep.
should know this. It's one.
Okay, I think time's up.
I've only got 4.
You only got 4?
I only got 4 because I'm like, and I'm mentally watching it in my head, and I'm not coming up with.
I only got 3 of them, so you're doing better than me.
And I'm not even sure my 4 are right.
They don't have to be in the right order, do they, Ken?
No.
Okay.
All right. So, Andy, if you're the only one that's got 5, why don't you say what they are?
Okay. Here they are. I wrote them down just so you can see. All my lovin', till there was you. She loves you. I wanna hold your hand, and I saw her standing there.
Very good. That's all 5.
I only got 3 of the 4 that I wrote down.
Okay. So you know what? I just realized that I did something that was a mistake in the show, but we're still going to have it count anyway. Because since Andy, you tried to get the true and false, that counted as 3 points. So that meant that was for the 8th game or question. And I already asked another question, the Mary Hopkin one. Okay. So there was actually 10 games altogether that I put in by mistake. But in any case, you still come out ahead anyway.
Where are we at with points? I'm lost.
You
have-
won.
have
You
12,
won.
Oh,
12,
Again, yes.
5, and Susan has 8.
so wait. So what was the final? So Susan had 8,
Yeah.
and John.
John had 5.
5.
Wow. Like, why did I feel like you guys had more than that?
Mhm.
Again, I don't do math, but it seemed like John had more.
John answered
start-
more than I did. But
I started
weren't-
strong. I started
Yeah.
strong, but then,
Oh.
Anyway,
Oh.
the Mary Hopkin question, which Susan got, was like an extra question thrown into the show.
Oh, that was an extra
Well, I'm glad I
question.
knew
Okay.
it.
That
Susan,
wasn't-
you got that one. You got that one. Like you didn't think twice about that one. Now there's
No.
an obscure question, right? That is pretty rare, and you got it. Now the 5 songs on Ed Sullivan, you were like, I only got 3.
I know, and it's weird because I was like literally mentally watching the film in my head, and nothing was there.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that Mary Hopkin question was what I would have asked you if you didn't go for the true and false.
Gotcha.
Okay, so you got an extra question thrown in there. So actually, everybody watching the show got a bonus. You got an extra question in there thrown in. And even still, I'm glad I did it because Susan got 4 points for the Mary Hopkin.
Yes, that was a good one.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the weird and obscure I'll come up with, and stuff that I should know off the top of my head. It goes out through the Swiss cheese holes,
But you can tell there's a mixture here of easy and far more difficult, and it gets you thinking about other things. That's what I like
Yeah.
doing with people.
I think my favorite question you asked was the one about the other. What was the #1 single with the, and by guessing the the decade or the era from of the other songs that were in the top.
Yeah,
That was
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
that one you have to really think about that one.
that was a good one too, because I knew the year and everything, and it was one of those ones where the name of the song should have come right out of my mouth and went out of my head instead.
Right.
You know,
Of course, it could be even more difficult when you're dealing with the group years, because if it's like 1964 and you have to
Yeah.
name what Beatles song was in the top 10 as at the same time as others, there's so many hits the Beatles had that year. And even if you know that the year is 64.
Right.
what
think the
week
solo
was it
years
number
were-
1? Because the
Yeah.
song could have been number 2 or another week. Yeah,
Yeah.
Also, I think the solo years, it's a little easier to do like some deductive reasoning. Like you figure by the mid 70s, I don't think, was there ever a time in the solo years where they were like all in the charts together individually?
Oh, yeah.
73.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the top 40, they were.
Right.
Yeah.
Not all in the top 10 at the same time.
Yeah.
But
If I was going to answer that question, I would have guessed Let 'Em In or something from that
Yep.
era, like,
And
thinking
that
like
was
later,
actually the
late at
following
76.
year.
right.
Right.
Let 'Em In was on Speed of Sound, so
right.
the following
Yeah.
year. But you see, I should have known that because that very week in 1975, okay, I'm going to tell people this. The summer of 75 for me was my summer of the Beatles. And
what does that
I
mean?
was, I was 14. I was almost 14, not quite 14. I was at summer camp and a girl asked me if I liked the Beatles. And I
Okay.
said, infamous words, yeah, they're okay. And then she said, well, you have to listen to this and play this and do this and read this. And I became a lunatic.
Uh-huh.
But it was all literally July of 1975. It is that summer literally changed my life. And I just could not, it was like, I know this, it's here, it's not coming out of the mouth, it's going out of the brain.
Right.
So yeah.
So that month you started getting into the group, or were you discovering Wings? 'Cause,
I
since
was discovering everything because
okay,
the girl who asked me if I liked it, I mean, that song was on the radio, so it was number one. It was clearly very high on the radio, and we were still listening to AM radio top 40. They were playing it once an hour. But I also got into the group because the girl who asked me if I liked the Beatles was a little bit older than me,
right,
and she was, huge fans. We're not old, a year or two older. We're not talking first generation. Talking somebody who may have remembered Ed Sullivan better than me because I
uh-huh,
was two. Okay, but she started throwing records and books and magazines and stories and things at me when I said they're okay. But I was into the whole thing, and it took, I think, probably it took a while before I realized that the same guy that was in the Beatles was the guy who was singing that song.
mhm,
But probably didn't take all that long.
yeah,
So I remember the song vividly. I remember hearing it on the radio at camp. I mean, when you're a kid, the music of your summer, the music of the summer of whatever year was important to you can make or break your life. I mean, it's really, I have memories that are caught up, like all of us, I'm sure, memories that are caught up in the summer, the things I was listening to with my friends, the things I was listening to at camp, things I was listening to in the neighborhood. There was no, Walkman or Discman or iPod. There was the radio, and it was a little transistor radio.
yep,
And if you were in New York like me, you listened to WABC,
yes,
you
I
know,
did religiously,
and yeah, so, and those songs were just ingrained in your brain.
right.
And so my most vivid musical memories are always the memories that go along with summer things.
Always.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it
Not
wasn't
that I
really
didn't
cool.
listen.
Not very cool to like the Beatles in 1975. You like
Oh God,
them?
no. Oh, no way. It was, oh my God. It was the height of uncool, the height
Yeah.
of uncool. And I learned that when I went to ninth grade in fall.
No,
Why
I
are
don't
you
know if
listening
I
to that?
experienced that when I went to school, because I also remember 73, the Red and Blue albums came out and they
Yeah,
exploded. They did so well.
yeah,
So that reintroduced the Beatles to the next generation, as
yeah,
did the success of all the solo careers at the
yeah,
same time.
yeah.
So I don't know if it was necessarily uncool. Certainly in 76, when Paul toured here, that was
Right.
Yes.
his year. And you not only had Silly Love Songs and Let 'Em In the top 10 at the same time, you had Got to Get You Into My Life as a single in the top 10.
Exactly.
So it all came full circle there. So,
Mm.
Yeah.
the Beatles, the group, and the solo both, they promoted each other at the same time.
Maybe we'll see the Red and Blue albums get back into the charts again when they come out again in a few
Yeah.
months. Who knows?
I mean, I got those albums for my 14th birthday, the fall after that summer. I got the Red and the Blue albums for my 14th birthday, my presents. And then started saving up babysitting money and buying every album I could, both group and solo. I had lists. I would check them off as I bought.
I never
We used
had
to
the
love
red
that
and blue
little.
albums. I never had the
No?
red and blue albums. No, because my parents split when I was really young. But but it was an amicable split, so I saw my dad a lot. So my dad had his Beatles. My dad had all the albums. My mother had all the albums. My uncle had all the albums. All of their friends had there were Beatles albums in every home that I was in, right? And I just assumed that the world was like that because I was born in '72, so like
Mhm.
when I was a kid, every home had a copy of Sergeant Pepper in it.
Yeah.
It was like the phone book,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
it was so you talk about being, whether it was hip to like the Beatles. When I was a kid and when I was an adolescent in the '80s, it could not be more unhip than
Mhm.
to like the Beatles. Of course, I did get a jump on owning a copy of Thriller because
Yeah.
Paul McCartney's on it. I
Yeah.
bought that. I got that album like right when it came out because the first single off Thriller was "The Girl Is Mine."
Yeah.
And so by the time the Billie Jean phenomenon happened, and then the next 2 years, it was like the monster that like ate show business. I already had that album, so I
Mhm.
was ahead of the game there.
With that
But
one,
like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but like I also had the Say 12-inch, which could not have been like that was like the least hip thing you could have in those
Yeah.
days. But no, I would see the Red and Blue album in like other people, other people like
Yeah.
who were casual fans. But my
Right.
dad was an obsessive like me, still is. So like, and it was interesting. He had them in stereo. My uncle had them in mono. He had like the scratched up like Capitol mono. My dad had the re-release, like I think his Meet the Beatles is on Apple. I think he rebought them all at once in the '70s or something like
Later.
that. So I
Yeah.
had all like the full albums. I never had any need for the Red and Blue albums. What's the re-release of the Red and Blue gonna be? What's the
They're
special
gonna
The-
remaster
They're gonna
something.
remix. They're gonna remix the Red and the Blues. And
like from the multi-tracks?
yes,
But the
well,
question,
basically with the Giles Martin kind of remixing that he's been doing on all the box sets, it's that same kind of hybrid mono stereo thing.
Because
With
the thing about them is that when they came out, the technology wasn't there. They were just like whatever recordings they had. They just kind of made these albums, which were great if you were a beginning Beatles fan because you got the hits. It's like the kids that all got the one album when it came
Mhm.
out. It was the same kind of thing. But it was still in some circles, especially in my high school in Queens, my junior high and high school in Queens, it was very uncool, regardless. Um, there was that stuff is old, that stuff is passe. Why do you want to listen to that stuff?
Mm.
And you know, I found my tribe, I found my Beatles buddies, but
Mhm.
they were hard to find. We had to find each other.
it was very hard in the 1990s. Let me tell you, when I was in high school, when everybody was listening to Smashing Pumpkins and Nirvana, and I'm like, Anthology 1's coming out. What?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I think every subsequent generation had its moments of this is
Yeah.
not cool. But of course, those of us who persevered, we know better. They know better now. That
Right.
Well, I
I
think
had a reunion with some people, and the people that used to give me grief in high school were all like, "You're a presenter at the fest, and you do Beatles walking tours, and that's so cool." And I'm like, "Why didn't you tell me that in 1978?"
you were just
So
talking about the Beatles anthology, Andy, and like we said in our trivia show here, all 3 volumes went to #1. So it tells you, I think between that and Live at the BBC right before that, it created this whole new wave, which
It did.
hasn't stopped since the Beatles anthology, because almost every single release that's come out on the Beatles has at least gone top 10 on the charts. And even the box sets go top 10, which is
It was pretty interesting though, because then the Beatles kind of became cool again. They have Free as a Bird. Oh, do you see this old? And like I'm like, yeah, I've been listening to them, but like the kids that liked the newer, they were liking it to be trendy, right? Because though they were like, oh, this is the Beatles, and they would just be like, oh, this is so cool now, and I'd be like, well, it's always been cool. Where you been?
but you
Well,
see,
there's always
there's
going to
the,
be people that jump on the bandwagon.
Hmm.
Yeah.
exactly, but
I
the
would
ones who stay are the ones who turn out like us.
I mean, I would submit to you that some of those fans at Idlewild Airport in 1964 were jumping on the bandwagon.
Uh-huh.
There
Yeah.
was there's some of
Yeah.
I remember watching one of the I think the anthology or somewhere where there's footage of the JFK with them arriving of then Idlewild Airport, and there's a couple of guys like boys there who were like trying to like take their short hair and make it look long. And you can
Yep.
tell, like they found out about the Beatles like 2 days ago.
Right. Trying to
Murray
exactly.
the K didn't know who they were like the
Well,
day
they were trying to
before
get
he
the
was-
girls. The girls were screaming up these guys with the
Right.
hair. So of course,
Yes. Losing strategy to get girls in the 80s, I can tell
But it really is interesting.
And in the 90s too.
You
you.
can't name any other band really where every new release at least goes top 10 on the charts.
yeah.
Well,
Well, it's an event. It's
box-
always an event,
Yeah, it
you
is.
know.
So
And
I'm
there
real
is
curious to
an-
see how the Red and the Blue are going to do, because I always thought the Beatles one took the place of that, really. And the Beatles one was a brilliant move to pack everything onto one disc. Of course, there's a lot of great songs missing, a lot of top tens that didn't make it to number one, and a lot of album cuts, which the Blue album did very well.
Yeah.
So the Red and the Blue have their own purpose, but I'm curious to see how well those will do after so many years of the Beatles one being like the
one, yeah.
Mhm.
for the hits. To be able to say, the most important songs from the Beatles, and that's debatable because all their album cuts to me are great. It's not just the hits, but to have the
Correct.
greatest hits collection on one disc, you can't beat the Beatles one.
I'll
It
tell you,
does
the
speak-
Beatles
I'm sorry,
one was
Liz.
was great for introducing people. I mean, came out right when my son was the right age,
Right.
and I bought the CD, but I didn't need the CD, I mean, obviously not, but I gave it to him and he had a little CD player in his room and he was small. He was a little kid and he played it over and over and over again. So it was invaluable for introducing the next generation to the Beatles. Absolutely.
I was
Right.
going to say that it speaks to their, I mean, I refer to them, the entity of that is the Beatles now, of their awareness of presenting the music for the casual. I mean, I don't know how else you put the casual fan, the sort of like people not like us,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
who can
Yeah.
who can who can deduce by what year he's talking about what the single was.
Was,
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or what the
Yeah.
B-sides were. There are people who, want a greatest hits package of some sort of like, let me get the one album that's got like a bunch of the stuff on there, like as an overview. And I think they've always maintained like an awareness of like there's the folks who want like I thought the Red and Blue albums did serve that purpose very well, because that was the album that I saw the most of, I think, growing up, going to other people's houses. You'd usually see those two. That was like, and those were, if I'm not mistaken, weren't those put out in a rush to compete with the Alpha Omega,
Yes.
like
Correct.
totally like
Yes.
blatantly illegal
Yep.
Yes.
bootleg?
Well,
Right.
it's kind of insane to think that the Beatles never put out a greatest hits album, a legitimate one, aside
No.
from
Well,
A
in the
collection of
United
Beatle
States, though,
oldies.
there was
oldies.
the collection of Beatle oldies that wasn't in the United States.
Right.
I mean, for some people, the Hey Jude album in America was like a greatest hits in some way, collecting some singles and putting it together
Yeah.
like that. But no, it's compilations are really important. They are the introduction for a lot of new fans. And you can't just say to everyone, well, start with Please Please Me and work your way all the way through Abbey Road and Let It Be. Not everybody wants to do everything chronologically. So, you have a
It'll be interesting to see what happens with this Blue album and Red album, because we already have a lot of the Blue album already on the box sets that have been done, not the Magical Mystery Tour material though. So that'll be kind of, because a little redundant, because we have all that stuff remixed already on those box sets, but not the Magical. It's the early stuff on the Red album that people are going to be like, what's that going to sound like?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, since Jaws hasn't gotten to that yet. And it gets people questioning, the Red and the Blue are coming out, is Rubber Soul coming out at the same time?
Yeah.
It's going to compete with the Red and the Blue. I don't know. None of us knows yet.
Why would
No.
I don't know why they would do that.
Yeah.
Red and Blue is their own
Thing.
category. That's its own
Right.
category. To
Yeah,
put
yeah.
and I've never known them to put like simultaneous, Rubber Soul has its own history and its own thing.
They'll probably shelve that for like the end of 24 or something like that. Who knows? I mean, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
Ever since Sergeant Pepper, we've had one every year. So I think we're kind of expecting it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know.
Susan, find
Yeah.
out when you're over there, damn it. Come on, you're going to the Holy Land.
I'll ask questions and I'll get no answers at all. So, you know, I can ask all I want. It doesn't mean anyone's going to tell me anything.
Where are you going? Are you going to Liverpool?
I'm going to, well, I'm all right. So some of you guys may know about this, that Ken Womack and Scott Fryman were doing those Beatles master classes online.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
So I've been doing them since they started doing them during the pandemic, and they are doing a trip for a small group of people. And that's the one I'm going on. And I will tell you truthfully, I mean, I've been to London and Liverpool 4 times and then some. I don't need, and I'm tour guide in New York, and I've been, you know, I don't need to go on a tour, but the bucket list item for me on the tour is that we're going to get a private guided tour of Abbey Road Studios.
Nice.
So because they have connections.
Mhm.
So it was
Nice.
like, no, this is like looming on the horizon, bucket list, never to happen again item.
Very nice.
So I'm going. Not that you have to twist my arm to go to Liverpool and London, mind you.
Right.
But that was definitely the big draw,
Nice.
you know. And we're doing a lot of
Excellent.
fun stuff, and it's going to be a small group of people, so it's going to be a time to, as I said earlier about bonding with your tribe, you'll bond with your tribe, you know.
Excellent.
So it's going to be fun, and we leave
Excellent.
tomorrow, and I've been waiting for this for 2 years, so there you go.
Oh, you'll have a great time, Susan. That's going to be an awesome trip.
It'll be fun. It'll be a lot
Wish
of
I
fun.
was there with you.
Yeah, it's gonna be a blast. I'm just, you know, excited. But getting back to the Red and the Blue album, though, when you were talking about it being the first album for a lot of people, and John said, you know, they're not necessarily for the people who become the geeks. However, I can say from personal experience and also from seeing it happen to other people, it's the gateway drug. You know, when you hear the Red and the Blue album, or if you're a little younger, when you hear the One album, if you are going to become this kind of a fan, it makes you go looking for more.
Right.
And then you get the people who are like, started, please me, and work your way forward.
Right.
But
Yeah, there are enough
turns
sort of
people onto
album
it.
cuts. There are enough album cuts on Red and Blue
Yeah.
to sort of like not
Yeah,
just a
it's
single-
right. Not, you're not just hit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with the Blue album, they had to have a lot of album cuts because they had less singles as time went.
Right.
You know, it's not like
But when you listen to it,
64 or 63 and 64 and so many hits all at once, and then the American hits as well. So yeah.
I remember pulling out that insert that came with those albums, that Capitol 4-year collection. Find all these, you can get all these other albums.
Yes.
That thing was like a Bible. It was like,
yes,
this is
it
what I
was
gotta
where
get.
I made the list from.
Right. And they gave
Yeah.
you all the solo stuff on there too. It wasn't just the Beatles material. They gave you the solo albums up to that point too. So you were like, okay, here's what I got to get. I got to get this. I got to get that. It was a great guide to look at back in the day.
Oh yeah,
Marketing.
it absolutely worked, because I made lists of Beatles albums and then lists by each Beatle, and oh please, and in chronological order, and tried to buy them in chronological order, but of course that didn't always work. But and back in the day, now Ken will remember this because he's of an age like me, but we had PJ Corvette's department store,
Uh-huh.
and they had a record department. And when they had their all labeled sale, you lived for the all label sale because every album was $2.99 or $3.99.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I would save up all, because this was saving a babysitting money, and I would save it all up and take a huge pile of babysitting money to Corvette's and buy as many Beatles things as I could get, because they'd be $2.99 or $3.99.
Those were the
And
good.
they were the American albums too. So
Right,
of
right.
course, you know, that's
Right.
but what's funny is, to this day, I know what's on the CDs, which are the British releases. I know, but I
Mhm.
still sometimes will get confused and go, wait a minute, that's not on Rubber Soul, but wait a minute, yes, it is. You know, because I grew up listening to the American releases.
Well,
Well,
it's,
I have a sorry.
yeah. I mean, I'm very used to the British albums now, but there are times when I will hear a certain song from Rubber Soul, like It's Only Love on the American one,
Mhm.
and then hear Girl next. It's just how my
Yes.
mind works because you're used to that sequencing. You know,
Exactly.
you hear I've Just Seen a Face, you think Norwegian Wood next.
Yes.
But
Mhm.
it's funny, you know, and I barely listen to the American albums anymore. And yet I still
Yeah,
hear
me
the same
neither.
songs.
But you're you're pre-programmed in your DNA to go to it.
Yeah.
Well, it's what's ingrained in your brain from when you're first a fan and you're playing the albums over and over and over again.
Right.
So you start to know that. And even when you know that that's not the canon anymore,
Right.
your brain still does that. Sense memory is funny,
I know.
and
No,
it is a sense memory. It's like your finger knowing how to dial a phone number,
Yeah.
even though you couldn't recite the phone number. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
I got into a pretty heated battle a couple of years ago. I wrote an article in defense of the U.S. albums and in defense of Dave Dexter in particular.
Mhm.
And I got some pretty nasty. That was the thing that kind of like, some of the comments. I mean, for a band that said the love you take is equal to the love you make, there were some diehard Beatles fans who were just like really like rude and pushy. There's no debate anymore, you know,
They're very
like
unlovely.
really
Yeah.
unlovely. But then I got an email from Dave Dexter's grandson, like, my family saw your article because I went into Dave Dexter's whole history as like as a writer and as a jazz fan, and
Yep.
I guess he had turned them down initially. He was the big guy at Capitol, and he had turned them down initially. Um, and eventually, they were so hot that Capitol was like they just had to get in on the action. But Dex was responsible for the sequencing, and
Mhm.
he knew what the American teenage record buying public was going to want. So he like carved, he put the track lists together, all the cover art and all that kind of stuff. And say what you want about the guy, but Meet the Beatles' second album, those records were like how an entire generation of people
Right.
Dave Marsh
experienced
wrote a book about the Beatles' second album. It's tremendous.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a whole book
that's
about the Beatles' second album.
yes.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, Dave Marsh. Yeah.
What was his take on it?
That it's one of the best rock and roll albums of all time.
You know what? I don't disagree. It's like 29
me
minutes
neither.
or whatever it is, but
Yep.
it's just like bang, 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 bang. Like
Mhm.
it's really good on a rainy morning when you have to get in the car and drive. I remember having to drive my kid to school and in like January or something when it was like gray and cold, and it gets you going,
Yeah.
you know.
Not
Sure.
only that, you get very used to that reverb that he added
Yeah.
to the song.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
what for years and years hearing like I Feel Fine and She's a Woman that way, and then you hear it dry, it's like
Yeah.
lacking something. Now I'm used to it that way.
Yeah.
Still, I mean, that's the way I love hearing the old AM radio sound with
Yes.
reverb, hearing She's a Woman that way, you know.
Yeah.
There's something about the experience of that and having memories of hearing it that way.
Yeah.
But, I still love it dry.
Well,
'Cause-
when it was the only way you could get it, you didn't get a choice anyway.
Yeah.
So if that was the only way you could get this music and you wanted this music, you took it however you could get it.
Hmm.
And unless you
Yeah.
knew somebody in England, you weren't going to get those releases. So this is what we had.
That's
This is
true.
what was available.
Yeah, the
to us
music
until
was funneled through like a little transistor radio. If you had a nice hi-fi stereo in your living room, now the separation of the instruments and the vocals, the technology in 60 years has evolved to break these songs down into individual things. It wasn't how they were made back then. It was just make it, put it out, mass consumption, and let it be heard and make people buy it. But now it's
I seem to remember a quote, and I cannot for the life of me, I think it was Pete Townsend, but don't quote me because it could have been one of the Beatles and I mix these things up, who said, we don't make our records in really great stereo because they're going to be played on transistor radios. So you don't make something that's going to be played tinny to make it be played in hi-fi. Something along those lines. We make them tinny because that's how people are going to hear them.
Speaking of Pete Townsend, Susan, I know you adore him. Did you see the news about the next box set coming out in September?
I did not yet. What are you going to tell me?
Who you're getting a deluxe box set of Who's Next and the Lifehouse
Ooh.
sessions. Yeah.
Ooh, all right.
September 15th.
Oh, well, my birthday is close to that time. Hint, hint, hint. I'll have to drop some broad hints on my husband.
It's
Hey,
really,
Jim.
it's tremendous. It's like 11 discs.
Yeah.
Ooh,
It's a Lifehouse graphic novel. It's like $300. It's like a giant.
I don't care. I want it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
They
like
dropped.
for
They
super
dropped the
fans
announcement.
only.
Yeah.
Are you also like a Who super fan too?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah. This is has to be owned. This is not an option. This is like
The only way I'm going to justify that I could justify getting this box is, my son is an artist, visual artist, and he's into graphic novels and I can only justify it by saying, well, there's this really cool graphic novel in it that you might enjoy as well. I just want the remix and the Blu-ray with the 5.1. If they just
Yeah.
did those two discs together, I'd be good. I don't need 10 discs of Lifehouse demos and
Those.
reproductions.
No, but it's
of
interesting
posters.
I'll
stuff.
take
You
it.
know, it's you
Yeah.
know. I mean, I'd be interested in hearing that. I have no problem with it.
Yeah.
I'll justify it somehow.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I thought of you when I came out. I was Susan's got it. She's because I know you love the Who, so I'm like, oh, she's gonna eat this one
Yeah.
up.
I missed that one this week, but then again, I had an insane week. So there you go. But thank you for telling me. That's
No
good
problem.
news. Yeah, awesome.
You mentioned Pete Townsend, and it made me think of the White Album Symposium that we had in New Jersey, and Chris Thomas was there. And
Yes.
he was talking about the White Album, and there are certain producers and engineers that are not necessarily thrilled with the new mixes of the Beatles or whatever. And they were just basically saying that the Beatles thought about what sounded good on the radio. They weren't thinking about 5.1 or anything like that.
No.
So that's where their heads were at
Yeah.
the time. And there's always the thought of, and this may be unpopular, shouldn't we be listening to the Beatles the way the Beatles heard it themselves and they approved it themselves? Even though with the remixes, they are approving it. Well, 2 of the 4 are right now, and the estates of the other 2. But, there's a lot of thought put behind that, what's right and wrong. And, there are purists out there who think, hey, those recordings worked the way they did back then, and nobody complained about it, and that's how we heard it.
Yeah.
To some people, those are perfect recordings, and other people want remixes.
Yeah. I guess there's something for everybody, though. I mean, I think the idea that when you wrote that article, John, that people actually like sent you hate mail. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. It's like, you know what? You don't agree, but then again, it's the same thing about the people who are purists about the way the music was recorded and the way it was released. And I think that there's room for both sides of the argument. I don't think there has to be a debate. And there's always a debate, unfortunately.
One of the things that I brought up on my podcast shows is that, yes, there are certain American albums that were like a hodgepodge, like Yesterday and Today, but a lot of the American albums use some of the same sequencing that was in the British albums anyway. Wasn't exactly the same, but you might have a string of like 6 songs in a row that were the same as they were on the British albums. So, part of the reason why the sequencing worked is because that's how it was in the first place. But then again, the argument could be made, they're all good songs. You would have gotten used to them in any sequence. So
I think it's also a product of the times. I don't think the album was thought of as a full piece of work until you're getting around to like Rubber Soul Revolver. I think album, it's like they figured out they've got 12-inch discs that run at 33 1/3, so we can put this many songs on them. I don't think, they weren't. When EMI assembled with the Beatles, I don't think they were thinking about a 42-minute piece to be sat and listened to from beginning to end. I think they were just cramming songs on there.
There was no such thing then. It was just to get music out into the hands of the buyers. That was all it was.
Right. And it was
I mean,
and a lot of it and cashing in, because I'm sure they felt that, hey, we got to cash in while they're here because they're only hot right now, and in 2 years they're going to be gone. So let's put out 5 albums in a year.
Right.
When you're talking
only now they do stuff like that. Only every single song the band has ever written, and they release a 23-song CD, and then or a download, it's 23 songs, and it's the 23 songs the band has, and then it takes them forever to write something else, and it doesn't ever match up.
No.
You know,
Well,
that's another problem.
you're also dealing with it. We talk about the Beatles, talk about a different type of talent. We need an album and 2 singles out of you every year. Okay. And just bang, 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 crank them out, you know, and nobody cranked them out like those guys.
Nobody, and they could, the thing is, they were cranking them out. They were just a churning machine, but yet there was so much brilliance in everything they churned out, you know. So I don't know of any group that can do that as consistently as they did.
There's a great
there were some really great groups out there, but none of them can do that.
There's a great English writer named David Hepworth, who talks about this all the time. He says the Beatles' genius was not their songwriting, it was their performances, you know. And he tells the story about the session for She Loves You, the recording session for She Loves You. When they turned up, nobody had heard the song yet, and Norman Smith, the engineer, gets a peek at the lyric sheet. He goes, "She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oof, this is gonna be painful." And then, of course, it's like 2.5 minutes of like magic that you still. I heard She Loves You this morning, and it is like fairy dust on that thing. And you know, how they could take a song that was like okay, but like turn it into, you know, like Get Back on paper should not be as amazing as it is, but that record kicks ass. Right. That's why so many Beatle cover versions are so iffy, I think. You know?
But I think that there's I can't even describe it. You're right. It's about the magic of the performance. That and the stuff still sounds fresh. That's the thing. If you listen to it 142 times, you know, and it's still fresh. It's still and you know, 50 years of Beatles fandom almost for me, and it's like I still hear stuff I didn't hear, you know. And that's what makes it interesting, is because you can listen to it and get something new out of it every time, like
every single time. Yes. And as the technology evolves, you hear even more. That's the greatest thing about it.
But also, I still think that it all comes down to the song first. If the song isn't a strong song first, it doesn't matter how well you perform it. You know, and even though you may not be thrilled with a lot of cover versions of Beatles songs, the mere fact that there's so many cover versions is a testament to how good they are as songs. You know, the songs have a life of their own altogether. So, you know,
I don't disagree with that.
With, you know, that it comes down to the performance. The performance is important, but if you don't have a great song to start with, it doesn't really matter. I understand what you're saying about She Loves You, you know, or you know, on paper and everything, but still, you know, they're great songs by themselves.
You're right. I'm just saying that, like, so this morning I was in the car and I had Mono Masters Volume 1 going, and I'm Down came on. And I had just heard the version of I'm Down from Anthology 2. Is it? And it's like, oh wow, they're really kind of like scraping the bottom of the barrel here. But that record is so great. With by the time they finished with like all the backing vocals and, you know, and the sound of the rhythm section, I was like following that all the way through to the fade out, which I had never done. I'd always written off I'm Down as being like, but like it's an exciting record. You know what I mean? I don't know that I'd want to hear somebody covering I'm Down necessarily, but like they're, you know, obviously the song has to be good. You know, and you know, everything that they did was, you know, what we call structurally sound, but there's that added element of the performance that makes a great record just to listen to, you know.
No doubt about that. The Beatles intuitively knew what to do in their recordings, and with the help of George Martin too, and the various engineers, and that's part of their genius as well. All right. So this started off being a trivia show.
We went off on a few tangents. That's okay.
And that's fine. So it's great having the three of you on here. Anything you guys want to plug? Anything that you've been up to? I know you
We're
what you're up to next, Susan.
Yes, but Chicago Fest for Beatles fans is coming. If you,
Okay.
Andy will be there, I will be there. A bunch of people will be there. It's going to be awesome. It's the 11th, 12th, and 13th of August, and going to be a fun weekend at the Hyatt Regency O'Hare, as it always is.
Right.
So if anybody's watching this podcast and wants to come to the fest, if they're local or even if they're not local, it would be awesome because it'll be
Right.
a lot of fun. So that's something to plug for sure. I'm looking forward to it.
My colleague O'Toole will be there as well.
Mm-hmm.
She always is. And John, anything you want to plug?
Nothing to plug.
Okay. All right. So thank you guys for doing this. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, I had one little plug for Two Legs.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot all about that. Not all
We got
swept
a-
up in the fest for Beatle fans.
Right. Well, we got a new episode dropping tomorrow. We had author Owen Ling join us, and we did a little deep dive on the relationship between Paul and George in the early 70s. Probably a multi-parter. And Owen wrote this great little concise book just called George Harrison in the 70s. And he's an Irish, based in Ireland and Dublin. And we've had him on before. And that's tomorrow for Two Legs.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. Thanks to all three of you for doing this. Oh, again, Susan's book,
Yeah.
along with Richard Porter
Mhm.
and David Bedford, is The Beatles' Fab Four Cities. Check it out.
I love the fact that you listed New York as one of the Beatles cities.
Well, that was
That's
David
so
and
great.
Richard came up with the concept and said
Okay.
that Liverpool, Hamburg, London, and New York all made the Beatles what they were. And
Yeah.
I was gratified about that too, because I got to write the section about New York City.
New
and-
York. Yeah. It has to
and
be. New York has to be
Right.
included.
And I'm passionate about the Beatles and I'm passionate about New York. So it was a win-win for me, that's for sure.
There you go. Well, hopefully sometime in the future, I tried getting all three of you together when the book came out, but maybe I'll have you on individually.
We'll
We'll
make it happen.
Okay.
You'll let me know I'm here.
All right. Thank you guys for being a part of this. And
Thanks, Ken.
Got it. Thank you, Ken.
thanks to
This
all
was
of you.
Thank you, Ken.
All right.
We'll see you next time.